Good day, everybody. It's Jim Norris here from Backstage Insider on a beautiful sunny day. And we have with us from Canada's East Coast, Dee Hernandez. How are you
Again,
doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Great to see you.
Good. I like to hear the fantastic word. That's a good one for sure. So
Yes,
going
absolutely.
going way back in your history, you're originally from Cuba,
I am.
which is great. Been there. My wife and I have been there 17 times actually to Cuba
It's a beautiful
uh,
country to visit.
over the years. Yeah, it is. And lot of music, a lot of that's the thing we noticed from our first trip, that there's a lot of incredible musicians and that music is a big part of the culture. I guess the
Yes.
arts in general,
Yeah.
but music especially. So in your family, was your family musical?
So, yes and no. Um,
Okay.
Music has always been a huge part of my life because my family are music fans, but also are people who were able to sing. But nobody within the family took it as far as making it a profession. So,
Right.
the power situation has been happening as long as I can remember. So I do remember the 90s being the worst part of the electrical situation in Cuba and
Right.
power. And anytime we had the blackouts, that was the time that my family would gather and the whole neighborhood, this was going to happen. The power went out, everybody knew you need to go to the Hernandez family because we were just going to do a concert there. And it was all a cappella and we'll be harmonizing. So um, music was a huge part of my life as a child, to the point that I even had to do it in my daycare because I've been singing since I was only 2 years old. So I don't know how that sounded. I'm just telling you what my mother told me. So it was part of a day-to-day thing. On some days, my grandparents, I remember we used to have a record player and they would just play music because it you couldn't sleep in my house. This whole thing of sleeping until 10 o'clock was not okay. And that
Right.
they would put music nice and loud every Sunday morning. So it was part of life, and like you said, part of our culture. If you were not playing music, the neighbor might be playing music. So music was a constant part of a flow for me as a child and until I came to Canada.
Excellent. That's great.
Mhm.
So how old were you when you first started to perform, to actually sing and perform music?
My earliest recollection, I must have been around 4 years old. So I went to daycare across the street from my home. And we used to do, what they do with children's in high school and in school. They do different activities. And one of the activities was cultural. And I remember singing there. And I remember how the energy that I received from my peers, how that made me feel, where I just want to continue feeling that feeling all over again. And I continued doing that when I went to elementary school. And then any time that there was any type of activity within the school, any type of cultural events within my community, I just happened to be the person that they would call to come and either open up for the event or just sing a song. Continued doing that in high school, and then I just got involved with a comedy club that mimicked a show that was huge in Cuba. It was called Sabadazo, so like Big Saturday. I would translate that, where they would have comedians, and then within the middle of the show, they would have a band play and entertainment. So when we did that as children, I just became that entertainment. So I would just pick a song, couple songs, and I would sing the song, and then the comedy show would continue. And doing that within my community just kind of opened up to other communities, and then ended up being provincially recognized. And I was invited to sing for Fidel Castro, and basically everything kind of continue getting more serious, if you will, from there. Um, but again, as I told you, my mother says I've been singing to 2 years old, but you know how mothers can be. So, I don't remember that, but I do remember I must have been around 4 or 5 years old.
Wow. So what kind of music did you listen to on the radio or records or whatever? What types of music?
Yeah, that's interesting. So the funny thing is I listen to a variety of music. I personally at home, my grandparents just played records that to be honest, if I told you exactly the records, I would be lying because I don't have the exact names, but I do remember a lot of Nat King Cole and Whitney Houston at home. My grandparents loved them. I listened to a lot of Cuban music, and my grandparents are from Guantanamo, which is like everybody know where Guantanamo Bay is based on the situations in the U.S. and Cuba, and they listen to a lot of country Cuban music, so guajiras. So I listened to a lot of that. And then I started getting my own personal liking to R&B. And after being involved with a group, the first group that I got out of Cuba with as a band, I really got interested in sounds of jazz and folkloric music as well. So I've listened to a lot of things, and I was very open to, well, I am still very open to music. You know, obviously you become kind of fascinated with one specific one as a musician once in a while. But I was very exposed to, you know, commercial music, not so much, not so commercial, and then the things that I would just, you know, some things that were not even that accessible in Cuba at the time.
That's great. So what did you, play any instruments as well? Did you pick up anything along the way?
So, in Cuba, you start going to school, like a conservatory of music. You go and do this big test, and if you are worthy, then you are picked to go to a music school. So I am from Havana, but I'm from the outskirts of Havana. So people from Havana don't consider me being from Havana because we
Or
raise pigs and we have a lot of vegetation. So it's very country, close to the airport. So transportation was always very difficult to get to the main parts of like the big city where the schools of music would be available as well as dance. I was actually very interested in dancing as well. And when I tried out at the time, it was very difficult for my parents. So after being involved in that show that I've mentioned in the past, where eventually I sang for the president of Cuba at the time, I was placed into a music school. And at this time, I was 11, 12 years old, and I picked up my piano. I don't know if you can see it back there. And I went to this conservatory of music. It was extremely difficult because I had to do all those years that I was missing when I went in the first year in school. Um, I'm not a great piano player, but I do use it a lot as a great tool, and that's how I'm able to create my songs and share those songs with the musicians that I've worked with in order to make the music that I make now. And I played a little bit of flute, but let's not talk about that. That was in high school, and I stopped, and now I'm terrible.
okay. So how did you end up coming to Canada? How did that come about?
So it was a project. So there is a project that is based out of Halifax. That what they do there, they basically pick a lot of instruments or get donations from musicians or people within their community and I mean actually whole Canada, and they bring these instruments to Cuba to the music schools because you could have people, musicians, young kids like myself at the time who were prodigies or they were fantastic, but they had no instruments to take home to practice. I was one of those people actually. So I never actually had a piano. So I had to stay after school, after the whole day of school, after school to be able to practice, to be able to show my teachers what I've learned the day before. And the project, the idea was to kind of create a multi interchange, an exchange, excuse me, of musicians from Cuba. And I just happened to be picked to be the lead singer. And we came the first time. I was around 14 years old, and we did an East Coast tour, and we did a lot of jazz festivals, including the Halifax Jazz Festival. We were even invited to the one in Montreal, the Montreal Jazz Festival, but there were complications with our flight, and which is unfortunately now I can't put that in my resume. But that's how I got involved. And then, you know, after the return, excuse me, from from Canada to Cuba, I just continue doing music and basically doing my co-op. I played with many other bands as well that most of them were adults. I was just a kid, but I wanted to learn as much as possible. And then we came a second time. That second time is when I decided to defect and became a refugee of Canada.
Excellent. So
Mhm.
was that complicated, staying in Canada?
It was complicated in many ways. I mean, I was 16 years old. I had no family. I didn't speak English or French. I had no plan, but I had a dream. I'm a huge believer that anything that I want, I get, because as long as I put in the work, it kind of translates into my reality. And, I had no fear. And I think that's one of the major things that we as adults tend to lose, the fearless sense that you can accomplish anything you wanted to do. And I mean, in the side of immigration, it was quite difficult as well, because now as an adult, I understand that taking in a young person with no supervision can be a big responsibility, right? I'm a mother, so it took a long time to get a residence. It took a long time for me to get a citizenship. But during that time, again, I think when you're young, you really don't see the repercussions of a lot of your actions. So you just continue. I just kept on tracking until everything worked out. And, you know, in the other part, it was the greatest story of my life. And I think I would do it all over and all over again. I've learned
Excellent.
I've learned a lot musically. I came to the East Coast and then I moved to Toronto, and I worked with the best. And I got exposed to music that I didn't even know existed, as well as cultures that never even passed across my mind at the time that I could learn from. So,
That's great. So when did you actually start once you came to Canada, when did you start performing, for real audiences? Was that, like, right
uh,
away, or did that
yeah, it
take a
was
while?
about a year. So I've came to St. John, New Brunswick, and at the time there was not a lot of opportunities for somebody like me, and the music industry in St. John was very condensed with obviously like local music. So it was kind of difficult to find musicians that could adapt to what I'm used to, obviously, and or were even if, venues that would give somebody like myself an opportunity. Plus, I was quite young, so you couldn't just play at a bar, right?
Right.
Which is really the most predominant venues that are around here or there. And but thankfully, the world is actually smaller than we tend to think. And somebody saw me play with the band that I was with, the big band that I came from Canada to Cuba to Cuba to Canada with in the past. And the word got out in Toronto that I was here, and there was this Brazilian fusion band that wanted to record something with me. So they flew me down. I was supposed to be there for like a couple weeks just to do the job and come back. But the moment that I was there, I was already getting phone calls to do backup singing, and and it was a really easy transition for me to not return to the East Coast, because I felt a sense of acceptance at that time, and the opportunities were more predominant at the time in Toronto. So I did a lot of that, but it wasn't I was more like a singer for hire versus an artist at the
Right.
time. And so that gave me all the tools that I believe that I have now, that allows me to create what I want to make and to share the music that is actually within me. But I learned a lot that way, and I did a lot of shows in places in Ontario that I don't even remember, because I think at that age I was so young. Things were happening so quick that I couldn't really take the time to process all the stuff that I was doing, and learn the language. I was going through high school at the same time. I was teaching as well, um, and I was teaching dance and I was teaching music at a schools, and also my high school as well. So there's a lot of things going on. And but that was really the first time after living in Canada where I can actually do my purpose, do what I only knew what to do. And then I returned to the East Coast afterwards, and it took me a little bit, but I got back on it.
That's great. So when did you do your first recording, and where? When did that happen?
Well, the well, my first recording was in Toronto, and it was in Portuguese. I don't
Oh,
even speak Portuguese, so that was awesome, and it wasn't my original music. But my first recording, my own personal project, was back in St. John when I returned into the East Coast. And I did a 3-song demo in which I wanted to make a record. And I applied for that at the time and to see if I could get some grants for that. And I never did. So that music sat there. And then I went to Canadian Idol, and I was one of the top 30 and almost a top 10. It was me and another person, and he got it. And after that, I did started recording again. And so this must have been 2005, 2006, um, when I first started writing for some of the music that is actually will be out in my upcoming album in 2026 on September. And that was interesting because we didn't have any money to do this, and when we did the recordings, we didn't do this at a formally studio. I did this at a warehouse, which was it gave me a sound. I wanted to mimic the sound of a Grem, which is a studio in Havana, Cuba, that I've actually sung live at. So I wanted to have that feel, and that's the kind of feel that I like to hear in my music, as if I'm playing live, somewhat. Um, and um, and it's funny enough how the world turns around after 20 some years. I presented that same project and I did get the grant and I did an EP from that first few recordings that I did in New Brunswick.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's great. So your new album, tell us about that. Where did the music come from
Mm.
and what's the album like?
So the album is called the Secha, or I'm Done. So it's a way of me like getting rid of the old skin, and it speaks a lot about the songs have different stories of my life within my experience from the beginning that I came to Canada to where I am right now in my current life. So you'll hear the growth not only as a writer, as a singer, but also as a person that I am, right? Because I really like to write from personal experiences. And the first song, which is the single that is out right now, Odumile, was one of the last songs I wrote for this album, and it was during my mother went through cancer, and so I felt like I needed some type of connection to not only be her light and her positivity, but also for me to keep myself grounded within what is important, and that I'm not alone, that all the things that we face in life are, you know, we never alone, even if it feels that way. And so that's really what it is. It's a walk through my life, spiritually, in the love life, and even in the way that we process information at a teenager age to a young adult to a 40-some-year-old woman. I'm not that old, but and so it's basically a story, a short story or a book of the experiences that I had in my life. And the reason why I did this is because a lot of times we go through this self judgment, thinking that we are the only ones who experience certain situations. And then when you look around and you start sharing, pieces of information or things that you have experienced, you realize that there are a lot of people who have gone through similar circumstances and they feel just like you, right? They feel like it's only them. So maybe you shouldn't share the stories or the experiences that you had in because you might feel some type of shame, or you feel like you didn't um, deal with the situation like somebody else might, because they might be smarter, or you know they might make made better decisions than you. And then at the end, you realize that everybody's really just goes through life almost in the same way. Um, and I do treat my life like a little book. I do journal a lot, so might as well share it with everybody else.
Right. So
Yeah.
what are your plans for live performance over the next while as far as
So,
touring or performing live?
well, I have a few shows coming up. I'm going to be in Nova Scotia, in Windsor, their Beautiful Mermaid Theater, in a few weeks, actually. And I'm really looking forward to it. They have a brand new theater, so they went ahead and remodeled the whole thing. So I'm looking forward to wearing the new shoes, breaking it in. And then I have a few festivals happening during the summer as well, which is some in Fredericton. Um, so I got a few things going on. And when it comes to touring, I don't want to tell yet, but I'm going to be touring very soon. It would be more in 2027. And I also do an Ella Fitzgerald tribute because I love jazz and I love her. And so I'm already completely booked for 2027 at the beginning of the year. So I have a lot of things going on. So I'm trying to keep myself organized.
That's
And
great.
yeah,
And with your busy life, because you've
Mhm.
had a busy life all
I
your
do.
life,
Yeah.
how do you balance that with your personal life, with family, with friends, hobbies, anything else you like to do?
Yeah. Um, I do. I know I'm going to sound funny, but I do meditate a lot.
Okay,
And I do have a really great support. My husband and my mother are fantastic support systems for me. And I like to spend time on my own, and I'm given that time. So after the busy days or the busy shows and the busy winter, like the one that I just had, I need time for myself. So when my daughter goes to school, I am given that time to rest. I think the idea of that we need to always be doing something, at least for me, it haunts me. So I really need to put myself in bed and relax and turn off the phone. And it's really completely forced. And at times when I don't do it, I actually get sick enough where the universe tells me you need to sit down and relax. But I do
right.
try to meditate. I do try to journal. And I try to lately, more than ever, I've been trying to learn more and more about my culture because after coming to Canada at such a young age, I really integrated myself within the Canadian cultures because it's more than one culture here
Sure.
that I kind of started losing a little bit of mine. And because I came so young, there's a lot of information that I was oblivious to. So I've taken a lot of time during my time off or during the times off that I have to learn and inform myself as much as possible.
That's great.
Mhm,
And if you could give advice to somebody that's just starting, going back when you're if you could go back to yourself when you were 16 and
mhm.
give yourself advice, what would it be? What would you tell a young
Hmm,
artist
I
looking
would
ahead?
say, as an artist, I would say to just take in everything that is so basically, I I love the fact that I was able to play with people that had way more knowledge than me, that were older than me. So I learned a lot from them. So I think being open and being receptive and knowing that you don't know anything is the best way to capture as much knowledge as possible. And as we know, knowledge is power. I also would say to be careful of the distractions. Distractions come in dressed in different ways. Sometimes they look very handsome, and and sometimes distractions come in a form of freedom that is not really freedom. If anything, is something that would hold you back. So just realize that your freedom and your time is very, very, very precious and to invest it in learning as much as possible and then believe that you're able to do anything you want to do and that there will always be somebody better than you better there will be somebody always who does music different than you but that doesn't diminish your light your power and the beauty that you create yourself so just believe on the artistry that is coming out of you versus trying to create something just because what everybody else is doing.
Excellent. Oh, that's great advice. Well,
Thank you.
thanks a lot, Dee. It was really
I
good to meet
appreciate it.
you, and I think
Congratulations.
you're an inspiration, and
Wow.
all the best in your future endeavors.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. I can put you now in my books.
Okay.
Cheers.